Okay, well, we want to welcome any of you who are here with us at the Douglas County Courthouse, as well as those of you joining us online. Just a bit of information as we continue to have our hybrid format meetings. All participants will be entered into the meeting with their audio muted, meaning that the commission and the public will not be able to hear you. Presenters will be unmuted when their agenda item comes up. We will ask that all online presenters use good conference call etiquette and mute their line when not speaking and introduce themselves each time they speak. If you have public comment on an agenda item or under regular public comment, please use the raise your hand function on Zoom. Staff will call on you and unmute you. We ask that all speakers give their name and address for the minutes. The county reserves the right to shut off the microphone and remove any speaker from the meeting if they are vulgar, rude, or inappropriate. A recording of this meeting will be posted online at the conclusion of our meeting, and you'll probably even still get to see our cool technical difficulties at the beginning. But we will start today with our consent agenda. Would commissioners like to pull anything from the consent agenda?
No.
No.
Would you like to make a motion for us to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve today's consent agenda.
Second.
All of those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, we will move on to general public comment. Do we have anyone at the courthouse for general public comment? Do you have anyone online for general public comment? We will move right into our regular agenda. We'll start with item 3.1, Planning Department. Consider a conditional use permit, CUP 21-00078 for an event center at 2351 North 400 Road. Do we have a presentation for this, Sarah?
Yes, Mary Miller from Lawrence Douglas County Planning is joining the panel for the presentation.
Good evening, Commissioners. Mary Miller, City County Planner. As you mentioned, the subject property is located at 2351 North 400 Road. This is an application to renew a conditional use permit for an existing event center at the Enright Garden Center. I will share my screen. Oh, it says it's disabled.
Give us a minute, Mary.
Sure.
You can try now, Mary.
Thank you. The subject property is shown here outlined in blue. It's on the eastern side of the county in the southeastern portion. It is not within the urban growth area of any city, and it is not within the 3-mile planning radius of Baldwin City, which is highlighted here in blue. It is within a 1/4 mile of the Johnson County border, so our 1/2 mile notification extended over into Johnson County. Enright Garden Center is located on the 3 parcels which are listed in the CUP application, but the event center is primarily on that center parcel. The property consists of a number of greenhouses, which are agricultural uses. There are the sale of ancillary sales of the ancillary retail sales occur here in association with these agricultural uses. Per the 2020 revised zoning regulations, if you have a sales area of less than 500 square feet, you can sell products you not raise on the property that's associated with an agricultural use without a conditional use permit. And so this conditional use permit is for the event center that's highlighted in yellow and its associated garden, which is outlined here in yellow as well. This is a view of the Enright Garden facility from the road. The event center is within the interior of the site. And this is the event center. It's called Brooklyn Hall. It consists of a building, and then there's a garden area as shown here. A conditional use permit was originally approved in 2001 for the Enright Garden Center, and that was due to their sales of ancillary agricultural retail sales. Prior to 2020, any amount of ancillary sales required a CUP. In 2009, that conditional use permit was amended to allow the reception hall, which we now term the event center. And this was approved in March of 2010. With that approval, the expiration date was not extended, and that was probably just an oversight. And so the CUP expired. The Zoning and Codes Office notified the applicant that it had expired, and they submitted this application to bring their project back into compliance. Golden factors we look at when we review conditional use permits include compatibility with zoning and land uses in the area. The area is zoned agricultural, either Ag 1 or Ag 2, depending on the size of the parcels. Land uses in the area, this is from the Douglas County Appraiser's Office, it's primarily agricultural, although there are single-family residences in the area as well. The stars signify commercial uses in the area. The one on the east is the Enright Event Center, and the one on the west is a winery tasting room, which also has events. The winery tasting room is smaller scale, so it was approved through the agritourism registration. The Enright Event Center is larger, so while it's agritourism, it does require approval through the conditional use permit. Another thing we look at is, would it impact the character of the area? We typically use a 1 mile radius of the subject property, but as that would extend into Johnson County, we just move the radius over. The subject property is outlined in blue, and of course, the event center is marked with a yellow dot, and the other event center to the west is marked in an orange dot. This area is primarily agricultural with some rural residences, and there is a large areas of woodlands located in the area. As this event center has been operating since 2009 and there have been no complaints, it's considered to be compatible with the character of the area. There are a few changes that staff is recommending to the conditions. One is that amplified music would not be used outside. However, the applicant noted that they do use amplified music in their garden for ceremonial music when they have weddings. And so the Planning Commission revised that condition to note that amplified music would not be allowed outside except for ceremonial music. Another change staff recommends is that exterior lighting associated with the event center would be off when the event center is not in use. And this would just make it more compatible with the character of the area. Other things we look at would be the impact on natural environment. As the facility is currently in place and in operation, extending the use should have no impact on the natural environment. The impact on community facilities, the water district and the township, neither one expressed concern with the continuation of the use. Property owners in the area have expressed concern with the maintenance of North 400 Road. And we discussed perhaps the applicant paying for dust palliative on the road, but there are other uses in the area which also generate traffic. We have the smaller agritourism use to the west, and to the east in Johnson County, there's a larger agritourism use. And so it was decided it would not be equitable to have this one use paying for the dust palliative in this area. However, staff did discuss we may want to look into a program that traffic generators could contribute to the maintenance or the dust palliative that they create the need for. We are recommending a 10-year time limit, and that would allow this use to be reevaluated, and we can ensure that it remains compatible with this area as time moves on. And the property is well suited to the uses to which it's restricted with the Ag 1 or Ag 2 zoning now. Agriculture is the principal use, and also as it is developed at the event center, and the event center is located within the interior of the site and with quite a bit of vegetation buffering it from neighboring properties, it's also well suited for the event center use. It's compliant with the comprehensive plan, which recommends that we conserve, protect, and promote our recreation and open spaces, as well as our agritourism opportunities. And as I mentioned, this is agritourism. It just can't be approved through the agritourism registration because of its size. And to minimize agricultural land conversion to other non-agricultural uses. And as this is an existing facility, it doesn't involve the conversion of any agricultural land. With the 2020 zoning regulations, there were some changes to the standards. A 30-foot side setback was added. It used to be 10 foot, that was increased to 30 feet, and the parking requirements were revised. And the proposal, the project does meet with these revised standards. The Planning Commission voted unanimously to forward this conditional use permit to the County Commission with a recommendation for approval based on the findings in the staff report and subject to the conditions as revised. And these are the conditions in the staff report with that revision to condition number 6 to accept ceremonial music from that prohibition. I believe the applicant intended to attend today in person, And I'll be happy to answer any questions if you have any for me.
This is Commissioner Portillo. Thank you, Mary. I really appreciate the presentation. It does sound like the conditional use permit is in line with past uses and that the Planning Commission was in favor of it. My question really goes back to that, the road question. So it sounds like staff have had some conversations because there are multiple users that bring traffic to that road about what we might do long-term. Is there a conflict with thinking about long-term planning for the road and approving the CUP for 10 years? If we do come up with a program, how would we do that implementation with a 10-year CUP in place?
And as I don't know what the program would be, there could be a conflict, you know, and it might be appropriate to add a condition that they would participate in a road maintenance program. And I don't know if they'd want to be tied to that, as they wouldn't know what the program is. And I don't know if you could craft some language that would, but I think we'd treat it the same as all the other uses. You know, we have the agritourism use, which has to be renewed every 5 years. And we would work with the township, see what they would want to be included, you know, for this. So it may be possible to add a condition noting that it may be necessary for them to participate in the road maintenance agreement to keep it open and to kind of like notify them that that is possibly coming.
Commissioner, if I could answer on that too, and Mary can correct me if I'm wrong, or Tanya maybe. You know, I think really the road program we'd be talking about would be dust palliative. If it was any sort of like maintenance or project or anything like that, I don't think that would necessarily be subject to anything in terms of the CUP. Our dust palliative program has, just for background, has just always been voluntary. You know, people can pay for it for themselves. And sometimes folks, you know, voluntarily decide to do it to be good neighbors and to help their neighbors out. But I think if we were to change it to require some sort of dust palliative in some sort of situation, in this case, I think we'd have to revisit the CUP.
Thank you. That was really my only question.
This is Commissioner Reed here. To follow up on that question, I'm curious if there are other CUPs that have had that condition applied, where there wasn't the issue of other contributors or users of that road to kind of consider the equity question. So I'm just curious if the condition's been applied elsewhere.
Mary Miller, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mary. Yeah, they definitely have, but they also have not. Mary, anything else? Like, I mean, I don't think we have any sort of requirements, do we?
Right. Mary Miller, planner. No, we don't have a set requirement. I know quarries always have to do road maintenance because of their large trucks. Anything that has large trucks usually has to do something. And we did a truck storage use up by Lecompton recently that the township requested that they participate. And so usually if it's something unusual like that has large trucks, I don't know that we've required it for like smaller events like this. We certainly can. It's within your power to require that. But in this case, it just didn't seem fair for them to pay for it when other places are actually generating more traffic. The Enrights indicated they're seasonal. They only work, operate in a short portion of the year. So we didn't feel comfortable with making that a condition.
Mary, you said some of the other businesses in the area are actually across the Johnson County line, right? So how do we create a program that's across county lines? I'm just trying to think how this seems like a really sticky wicket here, to put something in there that we would then hold the Douglas County residents to, but we don't have any authority in Johnson County. We hear a lot about dusty roads out in the county. So you have any thoughts on that? I'm just trying to think that through. It seems like it would be a really tricky situation to sort of manage if we had some people in Douglas County required to be in the program and some in Johnson County who, from what I heard you say, were creating the most dust, who weren't beholden to anything like that, to the program at all.
Yes, Mary Miller, planner. I believe that when this road program gets discussed, there would be cooperation with Johnson County. it would probably be the Public Works Department. It wouldn't be planning, but they would probably work with them. And that way, if it was possible to have a coordinated, if not, we would only look at the land in Douglas County, I would assume, since we can't require things of people in Johnson County, but we could try to make it as equitable as possible for those residents in Douglas County.
Do we have any public comment on this item? Would the applicant like to say anything on this item? Do you have anyone online for this item? We'll bring it back to commissioners for discussion.
This is Commissioner Reed here. I think I agree with staff's position that in this situation, it's not an equitable application or condition to impose. And I agree with your thoughts, Commissioner Kelly, that it's maybe a sticky conversation to begin and how that gets applied to these different CUPs and this is an example of it's right on the county line. So does North 400 Road remain gravel over the county line? Do you know, Mary? Well, applicants could tell us too.
Could you come up to the mic so that folks online can hear you, please?
Steve Enright. We had millings put down on the road when we first opened up, and that lasted 2-3 years, maybe a little more. There was hardly no dust. It's not the easiest for them to grade. It was a little rough at times. Most people really liked it. There's a few that didn't, but that's something we could sure look at in the future. Millings used to be the same price as gravel, but now they're a little higher.
Sorry, I guess I peppered in one more question into my comments there, but I don't think that condition is necessary in this application.
Yeah, I'm happy to make a motion and thank the Enrights for operating a business for many, many years out there. I'm sure this year was a tough year to be in business out there. So we really appreciate you doing that and finding a way for agritourism to happen in our community. It's just a really important land use out there, and keeping that land use agricultural aligns with our comprehensive plan. So we appreciate your entrepreneurial spirit and everything you're doing. It looks like this to me that this conditional use permit has been going very well. And so there's no reason that I see to make any changes to it. So with that, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the conditional use permit CUP 21-00078 for an event center at 2351 North 400 Road, based on the findings noted in the staff report and subject to the conditions listed below.
Well, second.
Everyone in favor, please say aye.
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 And we will move on to item 3.2, the Lawrence Douglas County Fire Medical Interlocal Agreement with the City of Lawrence. Sarah.
Thank you, commissioners. As outlined in the agenda item report, earlier this year in April, the Board of County Commissioners received a report and recommendations from Wichita State University regarding the governance and financing of the Lawrence Douglas County Fire Medical Agreement between the City of Lawrence and Douglas County. This is a long-standing agreement between, I actually think is some cutting edge best practice cooperation between us and the City of Lawrence for a unified system of fire and EMS provision. The agreement in front of you reflects the recommendations in that report. There are some changes from our current agreement. There are actually lots of changes from our current agreement, most of them really involving how the agreement is governed And it institutionalizes some of the governance between the city of Lawrence and Douglas County, and also a ton of recommended changes related to the administration and logistics of the financing of this operation. I think those changes will be really beneficial for both parties to streamline how we work together, how we communicate, how we make sure that everything is done in a timely fashion in terms of the operations of this service. The changes related to how the funding formula was put together are reflected in the Wichita State report. Previously there was a 75, roughly 25% split between the city and the county, and what would be considered fire expenses. The county still paid 100% of EMS expenses, but the rest of the expenses were split 75-25. The new arrangement has a pretty narrow window of what's EMS only and fire only, and then everything else is a shared expense, which is split 36%, 64. That distinction comes from, and I'm going to get, Chief Fagan's going to correct me if I get this wrong, because I think it's called standard of cover, which is related to the number of ambulances and fire trucks that are on duty at any one time and the percentages of those. So really it comes back to that notion that, you know, Douglas County has a primary responsibility around ambulances and emergency medical services, and the city of Lawrence having responsibility around fire services. In addition to that, there's been some discussion in previous years about an administrative fee. The city of Lawrence has implemented a internal cost recovery system in terms of an internal service fund, which takes costs from non-service line, non-direct service providers in the organization and reflects those costs to those direct service providers. For lack of a better term, overhead. That process is used throughout the city budget. We had a lot of conversations about how to make that work and how to make it equitable between the city and the county. What I'd say is that this administrative fee is in lieu of that. It is set at 10% related to the overall 10% of the service budget. But it is to reflect those costs. That will be instituted in terms of the 2022 budget, as well as the cost share shift. We were preparing the 22 budget in agreement with this agreement and those recommendations. I would also say that that 10% fee would be assessed, would be developed for the whole department. The county would pay 36% of that 10% based off of our cost sharing percentage. We will use that 10% as a model for other services like the Emergency Communications Center, what the county provides. It provides that service to the city of Lawrence and Baldwin and Eudora. So I think that is one of the pieces of this agreement that will be helpful as we continue to navigate through a number of city-county agreements that need updating and have that will need to be revised. I think that's pretty much all I have to say about the agreement itself. I would note that the city of Lawrence has approved the agreement. It was approved at their meeting last week. And after this, staff will work to develop a memorandum of understanding that will handle all those procedural issues. Be some fascinating discussion about audit costs and when we tie back up to audit and, you know, those kinds of details that are all very important as we work through these things that we didn't want to put in the agreement itself, so that if those need to be changed and modified as procedures and practices change, we can modify that a little bit quicker. And I'd invite Chief Fagan, if there's anything you want to add, you're certainly welcome to.
Good evening, Commission. Tom Fagan, Division Chief of Administration with Lawrence Douglas County Fire Medical. I just wanted to thank Sarah and her team with their hard work on this. I know this has been a long process to get us to where we are today. And I think it's something that not only, as she mentioned, it's a great value to the city of Lawrence and Douglas County financially through the provision, but also through the spirit of collaboration and the efforts and together with the governments. So with that, I'll be available for any questions as well.
Thank you both for the presentation, and I appreciate all of the work that went into this. I know that we have a number of city and county agreements to work through, and this is the first, which by being first always makes it the hardest, and this is one of the most complex as we're thinking about that administrative fee in particular. So Sarah, did I hear you correctly that this is something that in all of our agreements moving forward, that 10% will be a standard portion of it, and it will just depend on which government is actually doing the implementation of that particular service that will receive that fee?
I think that'd certainly be our recommendation moving forward, that, obviously we would approve this each time for each agreement, but I think that would be our recommendation. As I think the county commission's aware of, this is not a methodology that the county has. And there'll be some complexity. Like, for example, the jail rate is a daily rate. So 10% of a daily rate might get a little awkward. So there might be some things to work through in terms of how that works. So I can't guarantee that it's going to work on every situation, but I do think it's something that we can look to as a model. It was part of the spirit that we, both the city and the county, looked at the agreement, was that it should be both sides should have access to it. That it's a little harder in our system since we don't calculate that cost and don't necessarily have a place to sort of apply those revenues back towards. But the spirit, I appreciate that that's what the city is intending for it to also compensate us in those situations.
And can you tell us if there are any significant changes to the governance of the department in this particular agreement?
Well, I think this agreement does a lot to codify what has been informal governance relationships and to strengthen those. There's specifically going to be created a governance committee, which will have representation from both the city and the county and LDCFM. We're committing in this agreement to meet on a regular basis, which has been something that was not in the previous agreement. Simply, I know it seems kind of odd to put like you have to meet in an agreement, but it's vital to sort of hold us accountable for that communication, that we need to make it happen. In addition to that, there'll be an ongoing review of this agreement and the governance moving forward. And then I believe one of the recommendations out of Wichita State is for us to develop really a financial dashboard to help monitor the both ways. I think as we've discussed in the past, the current arrangement has the city paying us and then us paying them and then us paying them, paying us back. I think this financial dashboard that we will all have access to and this quarterly reporting will really help streamline a lot of those things and help improve that communication. As a bit of a preview for your 2022 proposed budget, and I really have to give a lot of credit to Chief Fagan for his just continued work in this space. The spreadsheet that have been put together to really illustrate this agreement and how it's funded for both the city and the county for both direct costs and these shared costs. I mean, it's one of the coolest spreadsheets I've seen in a long time, and it will be in your proposed budget packet. And that really, to me, illustrates very clearly who's paying for what and what percentage. And it goes all the way through for salaries into capital and how we're going to look at those different things as well. That is a huge advantage to us from over where we've been. And I think we'll really, good governance is built on good communication. And so I think when we have all of that clearly in front of us, that will be really helpful. So
I love a good spreadsheet, and I have really been excited about the big budget binder that we got last week. But I know that that's not everyone's joy.
yes.
So can you just lay out for us really clearly how moving into this agreement, what will be the effect for citizens who live in the county and what will be the effect for citizens who live within Lawrence city limits?
Well, I would say from a service perspective, there'll be no change. And that all residents will continue to receive the excellent accredited services provided by Lawrence Douglas County Fire Medical. Related to financial, if that's your question.
That is 100% my question. Thank you.
Related to financial, I think when you move from a percentage of 25% to 36%, it makes sense that there'll be a cost increase. Really, when you looked at what the county paid for separately, in addition to that 25%, and there's some, variety of opinion on this. I think the county was paying closer to 30% of those total costs under the previous agreement. Now we're still though at 36. This is a $27 million annual operating budget, if I remember correctly, Chief Fagan. So it's pretty substantial. As we indicated when we had this report, this is a cost transfer from the city of Lawrence to Douglas County as a result of this agreement. The direction was to not, that should not necessarily be borne by on the backs of existing county services to bear that cost. So I think that's one of the challenges upcoming in our 2022 budget. Right now, I believe the cost difference is in excess of 2.7. It's in excess of $2 million. And I'm speaking off the top of my head, so please use approximately in that conversation related to that. And that is made up of that cost shift differentials between 25% and 36% and the administrative fee. I believe it's.
I have some questions for Chief Fagan. These are just so that we have a clear understanding of whose responsibility is what, right? And how we're operating. So in Douglas County, Lawrence Douglas County Fire and Med provides all ambulance service for Douglas County, and that's the financial responsibility of the entire county. Is that correct?
Division Chief of
Thank you.
Administration, Tom Fagan. Yes, that is correct.
And so other than Grant Township, which has a specific relationship with Lawrence Douglas County Fire and Med, anybody who does not live in the city of Lawrence does not get fire services from your department. Is that correct?
That is correct, unless we're requested for mutual aid, and then we
Okay.
will provide support to any agency requesting.
So sometimes out in the community, I hear this idea that city residents are paying double for services, but what you just described would mean that they weren't paying double for services, right? They're paying a base rate that is a county rate for ambulance services. And then on top of that, they're paying for their fire and medical through their city municipal government. Is that the way you see it?
Yes,
Okay. So it could be said that as we look at these percentages now changing, that maybe there was some burden for medical services put on those who live within the municipality of Lawrence in order to provide that between 25 and 36%, that difference of services. And with this agreement, those people who live in the city of Lawrence, while they'll have to pay their percentage of the Douglas County change, will not have to pay that overage that maybe they were paying before based on WSU's study to cover those services. Am I understanding that correctly?
you are. I think one thing that this agreement does is really clears the formulary. And the reason I say that is previously, as was described in the memo, there was the agreement of approximately 2575 for the large operating cost of our department. But there was also another agreement specifically to the city of Eudora where Douglas County would provide 100% of those costs. And so as Sarah was describing, that 25 would increase a little bit because of the 100% costs of the Eudora operation, even though we had the same operation in Baldwin City under the other agreement. And so this new arrangement, based on the standard of cover methodology, which establishes what that cost share percentage is, I think really in a logical way defines what would be equitable in regards to a cost share factor to use for this agreement. And it's something that can be modified over time based on organizational changes or modifications in the standards of cover to where that ratio can be modified within the agreement. So I think this agreement is a much more data-driven, scientifically built model. Historically, the 2575 was purely built on the merging of two budgets back in 1996 and what those ratios were. So this is a more service-driven, service data-driven financial formulary.
All right. That's great. Thank you. Are you doing anything? I mean, I think because it was sort of that merging of budgets and this is more data driven, and Sarah talked about the dashboard. Is there anything Lawrence Fire and Medical is doing to help explain that to the public? I mean, because I do hear that fairly often, like we're having to pay double, and that's not, as you said, that's not the case. You pay for two different services that happen to be combined into one package. Are you all talking about that at all?
At the department level, we're not, but we are in relation to the WSU EMS study that was done. That is a presentation that was presented to both governments, the city and the county. But as far as the conversation of financial equity is, I think what you're describing, that hasn't been a topic that we've been outwardly campaigning on necessarily, or
Okay.
but we're looking forward to the execution of this agreement and what that does for the future of the city of Lawrence and Douglas County for the services. Because I think clearing the financial model will build towards a better understanding of what everybody's paying for based on a scientific method. And so I think that's the positive that comes through this process.
Thank you. I don't know that I expected you to do anything. I think I expect us to do quite a bit of that work over the next few weeks. So I just was wondering if you were doing anything. So thanks, appreciate it.
Yeah.
This is Commissioner Reed here. My fellow commissioners covered most of the questions I have. I'm just curious about kind of the timeline with the second half of this year in preparation for 2022 and what you all see as the next steps after today's step.
Well, definitely, like we mentioned, we have the memorandum of understanding that we need to continue to codify and draft and put together. So I think that's probably step number one. In addition to that, the Wichita State Report outlined a couple of different initiatives that we're currently working on. The one that I think of most top of mind is the coroner scene investigation service. Part of the recommendation was for the Lawrence Douglas County Fire Medical to no longer provide that service countywide. So that's in the county's lap to develop a new service method for that. So that's on my to-do list to try to put together. I think there are a number of recommendations in that report that I think as a governance group, we need to eventually, once we get this behind us, get to discussing in terms of, non-emergency transfers is one that comes to mind, and some other recommendations that could be some ways for us to move forward and implement some different best practices and methods of operation as well. So Chief Fagan, do you have anything you would add to that list of to-dos for the rest of the year and moving forward?
I think, as you mentioned, Sarah, the MOU, the administrative MOU, and then also the governance committee.
Yeah.
And setting up planning. I know even thinking further, but 2023 budget and, how our services are evolving in the community and what adaptions we need to take based on several recommendations, as you mentioned, from the Wichita State study. So I think the formation and organization of that governance committee is going to be essential to the future planning of the organization. And I think just with that shared collaboration and regular meetings, I think that'll be a very effective improvement to this agreement moving into the future.
I do know I want the LDCFM recently completed a station optimization, is that the right term? Study that I'd like to have presented to the commission. The LDCFM has had a part of the city CIP and they presented it to us as well, that, it's time to think about a new station. Those are not just expensive in terms of capital, but in terms of staffing. And so it's important for us to be thinking long-term about where that happens, how that works, how does it fit into the overall system, and those things. So that's something I would definitely look for us to get in front of the county commission later this year as well. But I actually think this is great that we have 6 months now to really put these findings into place. Having our budget prepared in agreement with this new agreement sets us up so that January 1, we can really switch over to that new financial model without having to sort of have the lag time. We've got some time now to prep for this to be ready for January 1.
Great. And I think that's what I wanted to make sure you all had confidence that that was enough time to form the governance committee to get the MOU done and be ready to implement the changes in 6 months. Well, 5 months now, I guess. The month is almost over. I don't have any other questions.
It does not look like we have anyone in the courthouse for questions, but do we have anyone online for questions? Then I will bring it back to commissioners for discussion. Commissioner Kelly, I think that your question or discussion about the Lawrence taxpayer is really important. That is something that I've heard quite a bit as well. This is going to shift a significant amount of funding from the city to the county. But I think it's important for us to also note that Lawrence taxpayers won't necessarily see a direct decrease in how much they're paying unless the city commission takes action on that, because it's part of their overall city budget. Just something for our Lawrence residents to keep in mind.
Yeah, I I appreciate us kind of sussing that out a little bit. And I think it's a complicated process that we, as both county and city governments, haven't done before. And it's, the first of many to come. And so I think it's important for us to be really transparent about every part of the process. So I appreciate that we had that Wichita State study session where that information is available and for us to really discern. And I think that it's important for us to be thinking about how to clarify what this agreement means in terms of tangible changes to the tax impact and tangible changes to how our governance structures cooperate with one another, and what kind of template it gives us for future agreements. So thanks for being here, Chief Fagan, to help suss out some of those details. And I will look forward to reviewing that spreadsheet further. And I think that, all that, again, just the transparency of information sharing is an important piece of this process. So thanks for that.
And I think along the lines of transparency, that administrative fee goes a long way to make sure that we see the important work that our county administrator and city manager do in having the conversations about these, but also helps demonstrate that we have HR, we have IT, we have a lot of administrative infrastructure that's necessary to support our direct service departments. I do think that making that visible to the public is really important. I am a bit concerned when we just say kind of blanket numbers like 10%, because we don't really have an understanding as to whether 10% of service budgets really equates to that administrative infrastructure. So I hope that this is the start of that conversation, and it provides a way for us to collaborate with other governments. So it provides a number that we can easily go into our other contract negotiations with the city of Lawrence, with other cities within our county, and say this is a round number that makes budgeting a bit easier. But it's important for our public to understand that administration is still more complex than a round number. And those are really important administrative asks, because the governance of how we collaboration takes work. And I think recognizing the administrative work of that collaboration is important.
If I could add to that, yes, absolutely. And, we talked a lot about that in the development, working through the report and coming to some consensus. What I would say is that it was the balance between what can we reliably count on for budgets year on year, and then what are those costs? I think in full transparency, in the case of the LDCFM agreement, those costs are in excess of 10%. I think they were around 12. And the ability for us to sort of try to figure out every year where that's going to be and be able to manage that change between multiple cooperation agreements proved to probably just be more complex than it needed to be to really help reach the intent that you expressed, which is that both organizations are in essence compensated for that indirect work. You know, I feel like it's also important to add in this place that, you know, cooperation is hard work. And it's not, but it's important. And it's definitely something that tangibly benefits the taxpayer. I've worked in a community where fire and EMS was not consolidated, and you could have stations near each other that were, one was pure fire and one was EMS, and though there are costs associated with that. So I think it's one thing that we're really lucky to have here in Lawrence and Douglas County is that we have a strong tradition of collaboration. And so folks that have lived here a long time don't really know it any other way. This agreement's been in place since the 90s, and it's pretty much how we do business. In the 90s, this was pretty cutting edge to merge departments like this. So I think it's also, and that really provides an underlying base savings to taxpayers. Whether you live in Lawrence, which you're also a Douglas County resident, or you live in the unincorporated area, or you live in the cities of Baldwin, Eudora, or Lecompton. So I think, but it is hard work, and it requires governing bodies to work together and make sure they have similar priorities and that we have good communication and documentation. And but ultimately we do this because it's what's best for the taxpayer and our citizens.
I was happy to hear you talk, Sarah, a little bit about the quality of service, because one of the things we asked WSU to tell us was, is this a good model? And they confirmed that it is a good model, not only for the service, but also financially, it seems to be a good model that's smart to do. I think it's important at this moment to sort of pause. There's been a lot of heartburn over this agreement. I mean, there's been a lot of elevated discussions about what the city's role is, what's the county's role in, and to see the city and the county working together on this agreement. You used the word cooperation, and I think so far it has been cooperation. We've agreed. Now it's time for collaboration, where we look at how does your budget impact? How does that impact my budget? And where we give some things up a little bit. And I think that's really going to be the tough part. But this is huge progress. I appreciate the city, who I'm sure I know that they're very attached to their administrative service fee. And so this 10% was some collaboration there. How do we get to that place? And so I think I've heard from the public, can the city and the county just get along and work together? And this looks like the city and the county working together. And as we go through our budget conversations, I hope we continue to work together, continue to recognize that we all have the same value of having a good service. And we appreciate the work that you do, Division Chief Fagan and your entire team, but also how we work together financially to make it all work together. That's going to be some tough work on our parts in the next couple of weeks. I'm happy to make a motion unless another commissioner would like to. Can recommend we approve the joint cooperation agreement between the City of Lawrence and Douglas County to govern and finance the joint operation and maintenance of Lawrence Douglas County Fire and Medical, effective January 1st, 2022.
Second.
All of those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will move on to appointments, and I believe that we do have an appointment to consider today. And this is someone that you've had a chance to speak with. Commissioner Kelly, do you want to give us a bit more information?
Sure. Charlie Thomas has been he has been here in this chamber talking on land issues before. He has served on the Douglas County Zoning Appeals Board. So he understands land use, and I understood he had an interest. I will tell you that I tried to visit with many people. This is a tough job. Being a planning commissioner is a lot of time. They are long meetings, and there's a lot of reading to do, as you all know. So I really appreciate Charlie stepping up and saying, this was something I'm interested in. I had a great conversation with him met with a few other people in the community who also supported Charlie on this. I think he'll really listen. I don't think he necessarily comes with sort of a preconceived notion, but really is open to hearing what people say. He has a background as a high school counselor, which is really great. Volunteers at the Watkins Museum, so really understands the history of the area. Those are things that are really important to me. I think Charlie has a great way of helping people who come before the Planning Commission. Many times it's their first time ever speaking to a governmental body about something that's very important to them. And I think he'll be a great addition to that group and helping people sort of navigate through those feelings and what that feels like, because it can be challenging and it can be intimidating. So I think he'll do a really great job, and I'm happy to recommend him for the Planning Commission.
This is Commissioner Portillo. I really appreciate that overview. I also just saw from background documents that Charlie has a farm outside of Marion Township and brings that perspective to our Planning Commission, which we know is incredibly important.
Yeah, Commissioner Reed here. Thanks, Commissioner Kelly, for having all those conversations and really talking with folks about kind of what the work looks like and what the intensity of that is. So I appreciate your time and labor in that. And I'm really excited about the fact that he's a high school counselor, former counselor. So I'm excited to see what his participation looks like in meetings and what he hears and picks up on during the presentations and people who come as public commenters or applicants. So, and hopefully we'll get to meet him at some point too. So thanks again. And is it a formal motion to approve? For some reason, I can't remember what.
Yeah, I think we generally make a motion to
Okay.
appoint.
What's that? Just your motion? Did you say? And I will second that motion.
And all of those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. We don't have any additional appointments, do we, Sarah? Thank you. We will move on to Commissioner and Administrator Miscellaneous. Sarah, what do you have for us?
Thanks. You do have a weekly memo this week, so that's progress. In that there is a letter from the Planning Commission speaking about Planning Commission appointments that talking about their I think encouragement to us to continue to appoint unincorporated area residents, but I'll just let you all peruse that for yourself. And, we can talk about it later if you want to. In addition to that, I wanted to note that there's a link in here that is live on our Douglas County website under zoning and codes for updates related to text amendments and other items kind of on our website related to Lawrence Douglas County planning issues. So on Monday, the Planning Commission approved a draft text amendment to change cluster ability to do cluster development in the unincorporated inside the urban growth area. So that full text amendment's on there. Staff is working on summaries of those changes. That I anticipate that coming to the County Commission on July 14th. We're going to work to try to get out information related to this item so that folks know what we're looking at. I want to, the way the text amendment is drafted, it's related to the urban growth area around Lawrence. This does not apply to Baldwin and Eudora that have separate urban growth areas and separate regulations for them. But we want to try to get the word out because at Planning Commission, there was no public comment related to this text amendment. And so there are some changes with this, and it's important, I think, for the community to understand what we're presenting and changing. So we're going to do our best to get that information out. When I have that, I will also share it with commissioners and try to include it here so you can help us get the word out as well on that text amendment. I don't have any work sessions scheduled until we get through budget. Then I think we'll have some more time to plan for those things. We will be in budget deliberations starting next Monday at 9. Those schedules are coming together pretty well. So hopefully I will continue to fill your inboxes with additional information on that. I wanted to add one more thing, and I had intended to get it in this weekly memo, but it's probably even, it might even be better that I didn't get it in the memo. So on Friday, our longtime Director of Buildings and Grounds, David Sparks, is retiring after 22 years of service to Douglas County. He was started in 1999, which is the year my daughter was born. So I know how long ago that was. And he was promoted to Director of Buildings and Grounds in 2014. He really spent most of his time at the Douglas County Jail and was the longtime maintenance supervisor for that very difficult maintenance building to manage that operates 24/7. Dave has just been a really tremendous partner as a part of our department head team. I will miss him. And I'm really excited. And next week I will announce who his replacement will be, but we wanted some time today to just really thank Dave for his service. He is, in his normal fashion, he is eschewing any sort of party or recognition. So he does not get to control what I say to commissioners on my weekly memo. So I did tell him I was going to make sure that commissioners knew about his retirement and wish him the best as he gets to enjoy the rest of his fun adventures and his many hobbies. So that's all I have, commissioners.
Thank you. And thank you to David Sparks for such a long amount of service to the county and very big necessary service when it comes to all of the building maintenance. So we wish him very well in retirement.
Yeah, and I will, excuse me, as Commissioner Reed here, I'll add that in my short tenure so far and spending time with other staff in other departments, I think Dave Sparks' name has come up almost every time. So he is very appreciated and I think beloved amongst the county and for all of the work that he's been responsible for. So I'm glad you took the time to recognize him.
Yeah, Dave's just another example of the great employees we have in Douglas County and just really appreciate all his work. Everyone's sitting in a nicely cooled building right here, right now, because of David. This is a very hard building to maintain, as we know. So just, and also just what a great guy. I mean, just so kind. And that's what we expect from Douglas County employees, and they deliver time and time again. So thanks for recognizing him, Sarah.
Do we have miscellaneous items from commissioners?
Very much looking forward to budget on Monday. Could be great.
Saying I think that next week will be the first time I have to be somewhere in person every day of the week. I'm very excited that it's for Douglas County. Okay, if we have nothing more, then we are adjourned.